A shock wave rolls across the Volga River, flattening the water into ripples of firelight. Glass detonates outward from apartment blocks. Brick dust erupts into the air, turning streets into choking gray tunnels. Civilians run, then vanish, thrown flat by the pressure as the second wave hits before the echo of the first can fade. Above the city, black crosses slice through the sun. Heinkel He-111s, Junkers Ju-88s. Flying low, precise, unhurried. This is not a raid. This is systematic erasure. You stand on the riverbank as fuel depots ignite one after another, towering columns of flame twisting into the sky. Barges burn where they're tied. The Volga boils with wreckage, oil slicks catching fire, bodies disappearing beneath the current. Factory sirens wail, then stop abruptly, cut mid-note by shrapnel and collapsing power lines. The Luftwaffe has arrived in full strength. Wave after wave, bombers unload their payloads with mathematical indifference. High explosives first to shatter roofs, streets, and nerves, then incendiaries to turn what remains into a furnace. Entire neighborhoods are wiped from the map in minutes. The air smells of smoke, scorched metal, and something darker. Flesh. From the cockpit of a returning bomber, a German pilot looks back and sees Stalingrad disappearing beneath a rising cloud. Later, he will write that the city looked flattened beyond usefulness, a place no army could possibly defend. Reports echo the same conclusion. Industry destroyed, transport paralyzed, morale broken. In Berlin, the mood is confident. Hundreds of kilometers away, inside a reinforced command post, Adolf Hitler studies a map of southern Russia. His finger rests on a single name, underlined in red, Stalingrad. The bombing is not a question to him. It is confirmation. Soviet resistance, he believes, is hollow now. The Red Army has been driven back for over a year. Its factories are overrun or ruined. Its manpower bled white. In Hitler's mind, the city is already dead. The Luftwaffe is simply delivering the body. But on the ground, beneath the smoke and falling masonry, the story is already breaking away from the script. At the Dzerzhinsky tractor factory, workers do not flee. They pause the assembly line just long enough to load ammunition. T-34 tanks, fresh paint still drying, serial numbers barely logged, are fueled, armed, and driven straight out of the factory gates toward the explosions. Some crews have never fired their guns. Some drivers are teenagers who learned to steer yesterday. None of them turn back. In cellars along the Volga's western bank, civilians press themselves against damp concrete walls as bombs fall closer. Each detonation feels final. Plaster rains down. Lights die. Children scream. Then silence. Not peace. Just a pause. Men emerge into it. Soldiers. Factory workers. Firefighters. Teenagers with rifles longer than their arms. They move into the ruins, claiming firing points that did not exist an hour ago. A collapsed wall becomes cover. A shattered staircase becomes a machine gun nest. Rubble becomes armor. Stalingrad is not dying. It is mutating. Across the steppe to the west, columns of the German Sixth Army advance with confidence. Dust coats their vehicles. Their formations are disciplined, methodical. General Oberst Friedrich Paulus, a staff officer by nature and a perfectionist by training, believes he is executing the final phase of a decisive campaign. His orders are clear. Seize the city, secure the Volga, protect the northern flank of the drive toward the Caucasus oil fields. Everything depends on speed. German infantry enter the outskirts expecting a shattered enemy. Instead, they find silence. No retreating columns. No mass surrender. Just ruins, blackened, hollow, waiting. Then the shooting starts. From windows blasted open by bombs meant to kill defenders, not create them. From basements filled with dust and shadow. From holes punched through walls by Luftwaffe explosives now serving Soviet riflemen perfectly. Shots crack at point-blank range. German soldiers fall, without ever seeing who fired. Officers shout orders and are cut down mid-sentence. Machine guns open from stairwells. Grenades bounce down corridors. Then everything goes quiet again. The city inhales. Snipers begin their work. They do not hunt randomly. They watch. They wait. They pick men who pause too long in the open. Men with maps. Men with binoculars. Men whose deaths create confusion rather than noise. Urban combat begins to consume time. Time Paulus cannot afford to lose. The Luftwaffe circles overhead, but the battlefield is no longer clear. Smoke clings to the streets. German infantry are everywhere now, press up against Soviet positions measured in meters, not kilometers. Bombing risks friendly fire. Precision collapses into hesitation. By nightfall, Stalingrad is no longer city. It is a maze of fire and shadow. German units dig in among the ruins, expecting the Soviets to break by morning. They do not. Instead, small counterattacks strike without warning, grenades thrown from sewer openings, bayonets flashing in darkness, silhouettes melting back into rubble before return fire arrives. The bombing that was meant to end resistance has done something else entirely. It has erased distance. It has erased lines. It has erased the rules the Wehrmacht depends on. And as the smoke hangs low over the Volga, one truth begins to emerge. Quietly, dangerously, the ruins of Stalingrad are not an obstacle. They are a weapon. The sun rises somewhere beyond the Volga, but its light never reaches the streets intact. It filters through ash clouds, reflects off shattered glass, turns every breath into a pale gray exhale. German infantry wake where they fell asleep, behind half walls, in stairwells, in side rooms with no roofs. Rifles are already gritty. Boots are already soaked with dust and blood. The city does not reset overnight. It tightens. Orders move down the German lines with growing urgency. Take the river. Break the last Soviet resistance. Finish it. Paulus wants momentum restored, wants clean lines on the map again. Regiments are pushed forward block by block, building by building, each objective measured in meters. The Germans give this fighting a name. Rattenkrieg, rat war. It is not a metaphor. It is a diagnosis. Men fight in darkness, at arm's length. Grenades are rolled down hallways before anyone enters a room. Bayonets are fixed not for ceremony, but because rifles jam too often under the dust and debris. Flamethrowers are dragged forward, their crews trembling, not from fear alone, but from the knowledge that once they fire, they become targets for every rifle nearby. A single apartment block can take a day to clear. Sometimes two. Sometimes it is never cleared at all. Soviet defenders do not hold lines. They hold points. A staircase. A basement window. A pile of bricks that looks meaningless until it opens fire. They let German units advance, then slice them apart from behind. Communication breaks down immediately. Radios fail inside concrete shells. Runners die crossing streets, swept by sniper fire. Maps become useless. There are no fronts here, only proximity. At the grain elevator, a skeletal concrete tower looming over the southern approaches, Soviet troops dig in with almost nothing. Ammunition is counted by the handful. Water is rationed by the mouthful. German artillery pounds the structure until chunks of concrete shear away and fall like tombstones. Still, the Soviets hold. German infantry storm the building again and again, climbing over their own dead. The fighting is so close that men fire blindly through smoke, aiming at sound, at movement, at instinct. Inside, defenders use knives when rifles run dry. Blood mixes with grain dust, turning floors slick and dark. The elevator changes hands multiple times. No one can say who controls it for long. Elsewhere, along the Volga's edge, Soviet supply boats cross at night under constant fire. They are small, overloaded, barely seaworthy. German artillery waits for the sound of engines, then opens up, shells walking across the water. Boats explode. Men vanish into the river, weighed down by gear. Still more boats come. Because every night, Stalingrad bleeds, but does not empty. Fresh Soviet troops arrive straight into combat. They do not receive briefings. They are pointed toward the sound of fighting and told. Simply, there. Some cross the river, knowing they will never cross back. They go anyway. Inside Paulus's headquarters, reports grow contradictory. One battalion claims a factory complex secured. Another reports being pinned down inside it. A third has gone silent entirely. Casualty figures climb faster than replacements arrive. Ammunition expenditure exceeds forecasts. Progress slows. Yet on paper, things still look acceptable. By mid-September, German forces control large portions of the city. The Volga is under fire. Soviet positions are compressed into narrow strips along the riverbank. Berlin is satisfied. Hitler is convinced the end is approaching. Paulus believes it too, because he has to. What he cannot see from his maps is what the city is doing to his army. Veteran units, men hardened in France, in Kiev, in the long summer of 1941, are being hollowed out. Squad leaders die first, then platoon sergeants, then officers. Experience drains away quietly, replaced by new men pulled from rear services. Clerks handed rifles, drivers turned infantry overnight. The city eats rank and training indiscriminately. German soldiers begin to fear the silence more than the noise. Silence means Soviets are close. Silence means they are watching. Silence means the next explosion will come from behind. Sleep becomes impossible. Snipers are everywhere and nowhere. A man lights a cigarette. He dies. A helmet rises above a wall. He dies. Orders are whispered now, gestures replacing speech. Movement is done at a crouch, then a crawl. Still, Paulus presses forward. Berlin demands it. Hitler demands certainty. And somewhere far beyond the ruins, unseen and unacknowledged, Soviet formations are beginning to move, not into the city, around it. Colored pencils trace German advances almost to the Volga's edge. Soviet-held areas are marked as thin, fragile slivers, compressed, isolated, nearly erased. To anyone reading them in a warm room, the conclusion seems inevitable. Stalingrad is collapsing. It is only a matter of days. Paulus studies those maps in silence. He is a methodical man, trained in staff work, obsessed with order. He believes wars are won by precision, by synchronization, supply, and discipline. He trusts paper. He trusts reports. And the reports insist the enemy is nearly spent. Yet the sounds outside tell a different story. Artillery never stops. Not for minutes. Not for hours. The city does not quiet at night. It changes pitch. Mortars replace rifles. Grenades echo where tanks cannot move. Soviet counterattacks flare without warning, violent and brief, then vanish into rubble before German units can react. The Red Army is not retreating. It is clinging. And every hour it clings, time bleeds away. Paulus's flanks stretch thin across open steppe north and south of the city. He knows this. His staff knows this. The Sixth Army was never designed to fight an urban battle of attrition while holding hundreds of kilometers of exposed frontage. Those sectors are handed to Allied units, Romanian, Italian, Hungarian formations equipped with outdated anti-tank guns and little heavy artillery. They are expected to hold. They are expected to delay. They are expected to be enough. Warnings filter upward. Quietly at first, Romanian officers report Soviet armor movements beyond the Don. Reconnaissance aircraft glimpse columns assembling beyond range. Intercepts suggest something larger than local counterattacks. Paulus notes the information, files it, defers action, because the city demands everything. Inside Stalingrad, the fighting grows more intimate, more savage. German pioneers clear buildings with flamethrowers, burning Soviets out of basements that collapse moments later. Soviet troops counter with satchel charges, blowing stairwells and burying attackers under concrete. Factories become fortresses. The Red October Steelworks, the Barricati Gun Factory, the Tractor Factory. Each one is a world unto itself, maze-like, reinforced, soaked in blood. Control shifts hourly, sometimes by the minute. Men fight over machine tools and conveyor belts, using them as cover, as obstacles, as weapons. 34 tanks roll directly from factory floors into combat, engines barely broken in. Some crews receive instructions while moving. Others learn by firing their first shot in anger. Paint is still drying on the armor when shells begin to strike it. German soldiers stare in disbelief. They were told Soviet industry was finished. Yet here it is, producing tanks under fire. The Luftwaffe tries to intervene. Stuka dive bombers scream down into the ruins, releasing bombs at near vertical angles. But the city is too broken now. Targets are too close to German lines. Pilots pull up early to avoid hitting their own troops. Bombs fall wide. Rubble absorbs explosions that would have flattened intact buildings. The air war loses its edge. Casualties mount. Medical stations overflow. Wounded men lie in corridors waiting for treatment that may never come. Evacuation across the Volga is impossible for Germans. For Soviets, it is barely possible, and only at night. Still, they hold. Paulus sends optimistic communiques to Berlin. Progress is slow but steady. The enemy is nearly exhausted. Final victory is approaching. He chooses his words carefully. He knows what Berlin wants to hear, and Berlin believes him. Hitler sees Stalingrad as proof of his vision, proof that relentless pressure breaks enemies, that willpower matters more than logistics. He ignores the flanks. He ignores the warnings. He sees only the city, burning and bleeding under German guns. What he does not see, what Paulus cannot see, is the scale of what is forming beyond the Don. Entire Soviet armies are moving, not toward the city, toward the gaps. On the steppe, engines idle under camouflage nets. Artillery is dug in silently. Infantry marches at night, guided by officers who carry no lights, no radios, no maps that can be captured. The Soviets do not rush. They wait. They are not trying to save Stalingrad anymore. They are preparing to destroy the army inside it. Inside the ruins, German soldiers feel something shifting. Attacks continue, but Soviet resistance grows sharper, more purposeful. Counterblows strike at moments of vulnerability, not desperation. Ammunition shortages ease suddenly for the defenders. Fresh units appear where none were expected. It feels organized. Paulus stands over his maps again. The lines still say control, but the ground no longer agrees. A wall of sound slams into the Romanian Third Army positions along the Don River. Thousands of Soviet guns fire at once. Field artillery, Katyusha rocket launchers, heavy howitzers calibrated in silence for weeks. The earth convulses. Trenches collapse. Telephone lines vanish in seconds. Men who had never experienced a barrage of this scale freeze, stunned as the sky tears itself open. Operation Uranus has begun. Snow swirls through smoke and pulverized soil. Visibility drops to meters. Romanian anti-tank crews scramble to bring their guns to bear, hands numb, mechanisms icing over. Then the tanks appear, dark shapes pushing through the haze. T-34s, hundreds of them, engines roaring low and steady, sloped armor shrugging off shells that should have stopped them. The first line breaks in minutes. Soviet infantry follows close behind the armor, moving with rehearsed precision. They do not pause to secure ground. They bypass pockets of resistance, leaving them to be crushed by follow-on units. The objective is not territory. It is speed. Reports flood into 6th Army headquarters. Romanian divisions collapsing. Communications lost. Enemy armor advancing unchecked. Paulus reads them, jaw tightening. Try to impose order on chaos. He orders reserves forward. Units already committed, already exhausted, already too few. South of Stalingrad, the same storm detonates against the Romanian Fourth Army. Artillery opens fire. Tanks punch through. Cavalry units exploit gaps, moving faster than German commanders believe possible in winter conditions. The encirclement arms begin to move. Paulus requests permission to redeploy forces from the city to stabilize the flanks. The reply from Berlin is delayed, then firm. Stalingrad remains a priority. The city must be taken. No withdrawal. No diversion of strength. Hold. By the time the message arrives, the decision has already been made by the Red Army. Soviet spearheads race westward, ignoring German strongpoints, severing roads, overrunning supply depots. Luftwaffe airfields fall into Soviet hands before aircraft can lift off. Fuel dumps explode, black smoke marking the advance like beacons. German columns retreat without cohesion. Vehicles clog frozen roads. Horses collapse, shot and left where they fall. Staff officers lose contact with entire divisions in hours. What remains of the Romanian armies disintegrates under pressure they were never equipped to withstand. Inside Stalingrad, the fighting pauses briefly. German frontline units notice the change first. Soviet attacks slacken. The defenders stop counterattacking buildings. Instead, they dig in deeper, conserving strength. It is an ominous calm. On November 22nd, near the town of Kalik, Soviet tank units from the north and south meet. Hands clasp, engines idle. The ring snaps shut. The 6th Army, along with elements of the 4th Panzer Army, now sits inside a pocket nearly 50 kilometers wide. Over 250,000 men, thousands of vehicles, tens of thousands of wounded, encircled. Paulus understands immediately what this means. He drafts orders for a breakout, while fuel still exists, while formations still have cohesion. His panzer units could punch west, link with relieving forces, escape before winter seals the pocket shut. He waits for approval. Berlin refuses. Hitler intervenes personally. The 6th Army will hold its ground. It will form a fortress. Festung Stalingrad. The Luftwaffe will supply it by air. Relief will come. Withdrawal is forbidden. Paulus reads the order twice. He knows the numbers. The Luftwaffe has never supplied an army of this size by air. Not even close. The airfields inside the pocket are exposed, primitive, already under fire. Winter, weather grounds, aircraft. Soviet fighters patrol aggressively. Transport planes are shot down faster than they can be replaced. But Hitler's certainty leaves no room for doubt. The 6th Army digs in. Inside the pocket, reality deteriorates rapidly. Rations are cut. Ammunition is rationed. Fuel becomes precious beyond measure. Tanks are abandoned where they stand. Engines dry. Artillery fires only when targets are certain. Wounded men pile up in unheated shelters. Frostbite spreads. Dysentery follows hunger. Medical supplies vanish. Surgeons operate without anesthetic, without sterilization, without hope of evacuation. The airlift fails almost immediately. Planes arrive sporadically, unloading a fraction of what is required. They leave carrying the wounded, until even that becomes impossible. Soviet artillery targets runways. Snowdrifts bury landing strips overnight. Pilots refuse to land in daylight. Losses mount. Inside the ruins of Stalingrad, the Soviet defenders sense a shift completely now. They are no longer holding out. They are sealing the grave. German soldiers listen to Soviet loudspeakers at night. Voices drift across the snow, calm and relentless, offering surrender, promising survival. Listing the units trapped inside, proving knowledge, proving inevitability. Many men listen. Few respond. Paulus sends situation reports to Berlin, increasingly blunt. Supplies insufficient. Airlift inadequate. Combat effectiveness declining. He asks again for permission to attempt a breakout. The answer does not change. Hold. As December approaches, temperatures plunge. Minus 30 degrees Celsius. Weapons seize. Lubricants freeze. Men sleep sitting up, afraid they will not wake if they lie down. The pocket shrinks. Soviet artillery tightens its grip. Each day, the ring closes further, methodically, without urgency. There is no rush now. Time is a weapon. Inside the pocket, the illusion of control is gone. Only endurance remains. And endurance is running out. It crawls into bunkers, gnaws through boots, stiffens fingers until they no longer obey commands from the brain. Breath crystallizes instantly, hanging in the air like smoke. Steel snaps when struck. Skin tears when touched. Inside the pocket, the 6th Army begins to die quietly. Rations are reduced again. Bread is stretched with sawdust. Horse meat becomes a luxury, then disappears entirely. Soldiers scrape frost from tank hulls to melt for water. Dysentery spreads through units already weakened by hunger and exhaustion. Frostbite claims toes, fingers, ears, sometimes entire feet. Amputations are performed with frozen instruments. The Luftwaffe airlift collapses under arithmetic. The 6th Army requires a minimum of 600 tons of supplies per day to survive. On most days, less than 100 arrive. Sometimes none. Whether grounds, aircraft. Soviet fighters stalked the transport corridors. Flak bursts bloom over improvised airfields already cratered by artillery. Ju-52s burn on the snow, their wreckage stripped for wood, insulation, anything usable. Each arrival sparks desperate scrambles. Men swarm the drop zones, fighting over crates. Ammunition boxes are opened only to reveal winter uniforms meant for troops who will never receive them. Fuel barrels arrive without vehicles left to burn them. Paulus issues orders to maintain discipline. Discipline fractures anyway. Units merge, dissolve, reform. Companies shrink to platoons. Platoons to squads. Officers lead men they have never met. Ranks blur. Survival becomes a primary command. Radio traffic grows erratic. Batteries freeze. Messages go unanswered. Headquarters maps grow meaningless as front lines shift daily, sometimes hourly, under Soviet pressure. Outside the pocket, hope briefly flickers. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launches Operation Winter Storm from the south. Panzer divisions advance toward the encirclement, fighting through snow and Soviet resistance. For a moment, relief seems possible. Paulus listens to reports with clenched fists. The distance narrows to less than 50 kilometers. Inside the pocket, commanders beg for authorization to break out and meet the relief force halfway. Panzer fuel is scraped together. Engines are warmed. Routes are planned. Berlin says no. Hold your positions. Hitler promises that Manstein will reach them. The Sixth Army is to remain where it is. Withdrawal would be dishonor. Retreat is unthinkable. Manstein's advance stalls under Soviet counterattacks. Fresh Red Army formations, reserves hidden for months, slam into his flanks. The relief effort falters, then collapses. Inside the pocket, the last hope evaporates. Soviet artillery increases its tempo. Day and night, shells fall without pattern, without pause. Buildings that once provided shelter crumble into open graves. Men learn to identify calibers by sound, counting seconds between whistle and impact. Soviet infantry advances behind creeping barges, moving block by block, basement by basement. They do not rush. They do not waste lives. They apply pressure like machinery. German resistance becomes localized, isolated, desperate. Ammunition shortages force impossible choices. Artillery fires cease entirely in some sectors. Anti-tank guns are abandoned, their crews reassigned as riflemen. Tanks become static bunkers, then frozen monuments. The wounded are everywhere. Hospitals overflow, then cease to function. There is no heat, no light, no medicine. Men lie stacked in corridors and stairwells and cellars, waiting for help that will not come. Morphine runs out. Surgeons stop operating. Death becomes routine. Paulus retreats deeper into the city, establishing command posts in basements buried beneath rubble. He moves rarely now. Each relocation costs lives. Each step outside risks sniper fire. Soviet loudspeakers return. They speak German. They list names. They describe the situation accurately, cruelly. They announce the destruction of German units that the Sixth Army still believes intact. They promise food, warmth, survival to those who surrender. Some do. Groups of gaunt soldiers stumble towards Soviet lines, hands raised, weapons dropped in the snow. Many collapse before reaching safety. Soviet medics pull them in, wrap them in blankets, feed them carefully. Inside the pocket, surrender remains forbidden. Hitler promotes Paulus to Field Marshal on January 30th, 1943. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. The message is unmistakable. Paulus receives a promotion in silence. He does not shoot himself. The pocket fractures completely in the following days. Soviet forces split in two, then reduce each section separately. Resistance stiffens in places, collapses in others. Entire units vanish without reports. On February 2nd, the southern pocket ceases fire. Paulus surrenders. The northern pocket fights on for hours more, then falls silent. The battle is over. Of the more than 250,000 men who entered Stalingrad, fewer than 100,000 march into captivity. Fewer than 6,000 will ever return home. The city lies in ruins beyond comprehension. not a building untouched, not a street unmarked. Stalingrad has become a symbol carved from ash and bone, and the war once envisioned as swift and decisive has turned irrevocably. The Red Army stands transformed, not beaten, not broken, but unstoppable. Silence falls first, not complete, but heavy, saturated with the absence of human activity. Streets that once teemed with soldiers now host only snow, rubble, and the occasional frozen body. Smoke drifts lazily from smoldering piles of equipment and burnt-out vehicles. The wind carries the scent of cordite, scorched wood, and human loss across the Volga. Soviet soldiers move cautiously through the city, faces grim, eyes scanning ruins, rifles ready, boots crunching on glass, brick, and frozen mud. Every street corner is a memory of resistance, every collapsed building a monument to German stubbornness. They catalog the dead, gather weapons, and escort prisoners, thin, hollow-eyed, wrapped in tattered rags, through the rubble. Many stumble. Some collapse entirely, left behind as columns move forward under the watchful eyes of Red Army officers. Commanders like Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky stand outside, surveying the city with binoculars. Their expressions are unreadable, composed. Yet behind that discipline is recognition. Stalingrad has rewritten the rules of war. A modern army, mechanized, industrialized discipline has been encircled, starved, and destroyed. Every lesson paid for in blood. Every tactic refined for future campaigns. In the German high command, disbelief and panic simmer beneath rigid discipline. Officers study casualty lists and realize entire regiments, veterans of Poland, France, and the early Blitzkrieg, simply do not exist anymore. Maps are redrawn not to plan offensives, but to prevent further collapse. Propaganda officers scramble for words. Temporary setback, they call it a heroic struggle. The word defeat is forbidden. Beyond Stalingrad, the impact ripples. In London, Winston Churchill reads reports late into night, cigar forgotten, brow furrowed. In Washington, intelligence briefings are rewritten. Timelines for the European conflict are revised. In Tokyo, Axis planners reassess assumptions. Stalingrad is more than a battlefield. It is a strategic pivot, a symbol that German forces can be halted, encircled, and destroyed. In Stalingrad itself, the city is skeletal. Streets are buried under debris, snow, and frozen corpses. Factories stand as hollowed-out shells. The Volga flows indifferent beneath ice-laden barges. Survivors move quietly, shadows among ruins. Red Army engineers catalog destroyed tanks, artillery, and vehicles. Medics tend to sick and wounded. Officers record prisoners. Victory is not jubilant. It is calculated, measured, somber. Families in the Soviet Union pause mid-shift. Soldiers in training camps stop drills. Mothers clutch children tighter. Across the world, Stalingrad's name spreads unevenly at first, then unmistakably. It becomes synonymous with endurance, suffering, and the moment belief shifted sides. The Axis learned that victory is never guaranteed. The Red Army learned that survival can transform into domination. Meanwhile, survivors of the Sixth Army, captured, starving, frostbitten, are marched east in columns. They are alive, but the defeat crushes more than just bodies. Morale, pride, and certainty are gone. They are ghosts of a force once feared, now broken and humiliated. Every command decision, every failed supply line, every frozen night in the encirclement becomes a lesson written in blood. The Red Army adapts rapidly. Urban warfare doctrine evolves. Combined arms coordination improves. Engineers learn from every street, every collapsed building. Tank crews who fought in Stalingrad refine anti-tank tactics. Infantry adjusts infiltration methods. Artillery becomes precise, ruthless, and devastatingly effective. The memory of Stalingrad does not fade. It becomes doctrine. Operational art for the Eastern Front shifts permanently. German officers now fear encirclement more than frontal attacks. Soviet planners integrate lessons instantly. Maskirovka, deep battle, and synchronized operations become standard. The strategic initiative has changed hands. The war's rhythm, once dictated by the Wehrmacht, now moves to the Red Army. Yet even amid triumph, the human cost is staggering. Millions dead, Cities destroyed, survivors scarred physically and psychologically. Stalingrad is victory, but not without incomprehensible loss. Every soldier, officer, and civilian carries a memory, etched into winter-frozen ruins, industrial skeletons, and the relentless flow of the Volga. The battle is over, but the war now enters a new phase. The cold is no longer a background detail. It is a weapon. Frost bites through boots, coats, and skin alike. Fingers turn black before numbness sets in. Men huddle in ruined buildings, their breath fogging in the icy air. Smoke from small fires mingles with snow and dust, creating a gray haze that hangs over the city like a shroud. Every movement is deliberate. Every step across broken streets is a negotiation with death. The Luftwaffe appears intermittently. Ju-52 transports wobbling through crosswinds, engines coughing in frozen clouds. Supplies are dropped in desperation. Bread frozen solid, ammunition for weapons long destroyed, crates tumbling into snow. Anti-aircraft fire rises from the ground, sporadic and deadly. Many planes never make it back. Those that land are immediately offloaded in chaos, engines running, under fire from Soviet patrols. Each crate represents survival, but survival is scarce. Inside the encirclement, the Sixth Army's numbers shrink daily. Platoons vanish quietly. Companies cease to exist. Divisions remain mostly on paper. Hunger gnaws at discipline more effectively than bullets. Soldiers boil leather belts for soup. Bread is cut with bayonets into ration pieces. Frostbite claims toes and fingers fasten artillery. Dysentery spreads unchecked. Field hospitals collapse under the weight of suffering. Surgeons operate with numb hands, instruments dulled by repeated use, without anesthesia, while the wounded scream or bite straps to endure. Paulus understands impossibility. He calculates fuel, ammunition, food. Every figure tells the same story. The army cannot be sustained. Requests for withdrawal, repositioning, or reduction of lines are sent up the chain. Berlin refuses. Hitler's obsession with holding Stalingrad is absolute. Obedience is doctrine, even as reality crushes those who follow it. Orders come with cruel regularity. Hold. Stand fast. Every hour of resistance is demanded, regardless of the cost. Outside the city, Soviet forces prepare with meticulous precision. Katyusha rockets scream through the steppe. T-34s line up on frozen ground. Infantry units move through trenches, forests, and ruins, disciplined and coordinated. The northern and southern flanks of the German encirclement are exposed, stretched thin. Romanian units crumble first, their guns outdated, ammunition scarce, uniforms inadequate against winter's bite. German reserves are too far to respond effectively. Slowly, inexorably, the trap tightens. The contrast between the Luftwaffe's promises and the ground reality is devastating. Every airlift that fails, every frozen plane lost, every ton of supplies that never reaches hungry men accelerates the army's collapse. Soldiers stare at the sky, hoping, praying, imagining reinforcements. Engines roar in the distance, some real, some imagined. Hope becomes a fragile, fleeting thing. Inside Stalingrad, urban combat continues, but it is no longer about seizing objectives. It is about surviving each hour. Assault pioneers clear ruins with flamethrowers. Grenades explode in stairwells. Snipers pick officers and radio operators. Ammunition runs low. Soldiers fight on instinct, without hope of relief. Every building is a fortress and a tomb. Even the command posts are not safe. Paulus moves constantly, hunted by artillery. Maps are redrawn daily. Reports come fragmented, delayed, or contradictory. The encirclement grows tighter. The German army smaller, colder, hungrier. Berlin insists on holding positions that no longer exist in reality. Obedience meets futility. Discipline faces attrition. Survival becomes the only measurable goal. Every failed airlift, every frozen supply drop, every frostbitten soldier is a reminder. The Sixth Army is trapped. The winter is absolute. Hunger is unyielding. Survival is arbitrary. And outside, the Red Army prepares for the final act. Snow falls silently over ruins that once teemed with industry and life. The streets are hollowed out, skeletons of buildings jutting into gray skies. Every step crunches over frozen debris and frozen corpses alike. Inside the southern pocket, the remnants of Paulus's Sixth Army are exhausted beyond comprehension. Less than 90,000 men remain from the original 250,000, many wounded, most starving, all frozen to the bone. Discipline persists, but only in fragments. The once formidable army exists as splintered units, surviving moment to moment. Artillery fire grows constant, relentless. The ground shakes under the weight of Soviet guns. The roar of thousands of howitzers, mortars, and Katyusha rocket batteries merges into a rolling wall of sound that seems to tear the city apart. Trenches collapse. Bunkers crumble. Men are buried alive beneath the rubble of their own defenses. Survivors crawl from ruins, deafened, bloodied, bewildered. The southern pocket is shrinking daily, measured not in miles, but in the survival of individual squads. Paulus convenes the staff in a cold, reinforced basement of a department store near Univermag Square. Maps, reports, and rations are examined in silence. Numbers are merciless. Food, fuel, ammunition, and medical supplies are insufficient. Berlin's orders remain unyielding. Hold at all costs. Paulus drafts appeals to withdraw, to consolidate, to break out while mobility remains. But every request is denied. Hitler's obsession with symbols outweighs the reality of survival. Obedience, doctrine, and ideology crush common sense. Outside, Soviet infantry and armor move with relentless precision. T-34s grind forward through rubble-strewn streets, sloped armor deflecting the few rounds that are fired. Infantry follows, trained and disciplined, moving through sewers, cellars, and ruined buildings. Each position taken by German defenders is recaptured or bypassed systematically. Encirclement is complete. On January 23rd, northern and southern Soviet forces meet near Kalik, slicing the German lines in two. The Sixth Army is trapped, fully encircled. German soldiers realize the futility gradually. Some cling to hope of relief, imagining Manstein's forces breaking through. Others understand immediately escape is impossible. Communications falter. Reconnaissance flights report Soviet armor everywhere. Units in the north and south cannot coordinate. The airlift, the promise of resupply, has failed. Hunger, frost, and constant bombardment replace morale with grim endurance. Inside the southern pocket, surrender becomes unavoidable yet impossible to accept fully. Soldiers trade medals for scraps of bread. Officers and enlisted men share shelter without speaking. Hierarchy eroded by starvation. Documents are burned for warmth. Frostbite claims hands, feet, faces. Field hospitals collapse. Morphine and medical supplies are exhausted. Even basic sanitation is gone. Survival itself is an act of will. On January 30th, the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise, Paulus is informed of his promotion to General Feldmarschall. A cruel irony. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. The implication is unmistakable. Surrender is shame, defeat, humiliation. Paulus reads in silence. Outside, Soviet artillery shakes the ground continuously. The reality is undeniable. Survival, not pride, dictates every decision now. By 7:45 hours on January 31st, 1943, Paulus issues the order. All fighting in the southern pocket ceases. Columns of prisoners are organized. Soldiers, gaunt and hollow-eyed, wrap themselves in rags and blankets. Some collapse. Some are barely able to walk. Officers march beside them, powerless. The once mighty Sixth Army has ceased to exist as a fighting force. 2 days later, northern units under General Karl Strecker surrender, marking the total end of organized resistance at Stalingrad. The cost is staggering. Over 250,000 Axis soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. The Luftwaffe's failure, the winter, the urban battlefield, and relentless Soviet operations have annihilated one of the most celebrated armies of the Reich. Fewer than 6,000 prisoners will ever return home. The Red Army has suffered catastrophic losses as well, but it stands victorious amid the ruins. Beyond Stalingrad, the war changes. Confidence in German invincibility fractures. Allied planners, intelligence officers, and resistance movements adjust calculations. The Eastern Front shifts permanently. Stalingrad is not just a battle. It is the moment belief changes sides. Mockery becomes shock. Arrogance collapses into fear. Certainty evaporates. The Wehrmacht learns that no victory is guaranteed. From the Volga to Berlin, the consequences ripple. German soldiers withdraw, cautious and fearful, encountering the lessons of Stalingrad everywhere. Soviet operational art evolves. Maskirovka combined arms, deep battle, crafted in blood and endurance. The Red Army emerges not merely victorious, but transformed, smarter, relentless, disciplined, and adaptive. Stalingrad is over. The Sixth Army is gone. The war has entered a new phase.